Hello, students, past students, and hopefully new students. My name is Luis Almeida. I'm the teacher, coach, and mentor on the philosophy of Spinoza and Gurdjieff. Today's topic is about emotions and why they are so important. We might not realize, or some of you may realize, that we experience emotions several times a day. Whenever we feel stress, what's stress? What's underneath stress? Fear. What is fear? Fear is something in the future that we're afraid of, that we have doubt that it will happen. So fear, the definition is fear is an inconstant pain arising from the idea of something in the future or past that may or may not happen, but we're going to concentrate on the future. So something painful that could happen that you're not sure of. Just like, when you are taking an exam, college exam or high school, or going for a real estate license, you might have a little fear or a lot of fear. But you don't know if you're going to pass or fail. You hope you're going to fail. You study very hard. So you experience fear, but also you'll experience hope. Wherever there's hope, there's fear. An emotion, pain. Pain arises in us when we feel that our desires are not met. And from pain, we go into hate. Because the object that we wanted to, whatever we wanted to do, we might be working on a term paper or working on a book, and the computer freezes on us, or we might be talking to someone on Zoom and the computer breaks down. You're going to feel pain. Why? Because your desires are not met. You're going to meet a friend at a coffee shop. They don't show up. Pain, automatically. So whenever your desires are not met, you'll feel pain. It's not rocket science. It's just, that's the way it is. But what is pain? The definition of pain, according to Spinoza, is it's a decrease of perfection. What does that mean? Well, perfection and reality are synonymous, according to Spinoza. Now, you wonder, well, who is Spinoza? Well, Spinoza was a 17th century philosopher, lived in Amsterdam, Holland, and he wrote the Ethics, and the Ethics was published after his death. But that book, the Ethics, is comprised of 5 parts about God. The first is about God. The second is regarding the mind. The third is about emotions. The fourth is about human bondage, and the 5th part is about human freedom. And prior to the 5 parts of the Ethics, it's called the improvement of our understanding. So we must learn how to improve our understanding. And what is the understanding? The understanding is part of the mind. It's the mind that thinks clearly. Spinoza explains that, and this is in part 3 of the Ethics regarding the emotions, in certain cases the mind is active. And in certain cases, it's passive. The clear thinking mind is the mind, is thinking with true ideas. Ideas that reflect the reality of nature or an object. For instance, you might have a cell phone, a smartphone, something like this. And this is about 2 years old. And how did this come about? There was an idea in the mind. Now, people think the mind is right here, the brain. No, the brain is not the mind. The brain is comprised of cells, and each cell stores information. All the information that ever since infancy, the first 10 years of a life, we're influenced by our environment. And now we imitate, emulate, copy habits, beliefs, and attitudes and from the environment we grew up in. And their environment was our school of life, our education. So Spinoza's ethics, or if you get in touch with your ethics, you can find it very difficult. Most people think they can read the ethics as they would a novel. Impossible. One of my students had the ethics on his shelf for 10 years. And when he called me, he was in despair, even though he was studying with Gurdjieff for 40 years. Nothing has changed by him attending Gurdjieff meetings, groups, and had studied on his own for 20 years and in groups from all over the world for another 20 years. He lives in England. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to make any changes until he met me. He was with me for about 3 years. And not until we got in touch with his emotions was he able to make progress. It's very difficult to take on new ideas, new thoughts, and understand those ideas. I'm not just talking about gathering information. And many of you read different philosophers, could be Schopenhauer, Kant, Descartes, others, or also listen to spiritual leaders, Descartes Tolle, others. And listening is great, reading their books is great, but nothing's going to change. Why? Because we haven't looked at our nature. You must learn how to look at your nature without judgment. One of my teacher's book called, and this is, you're going to think, well, here he's selling one of his books. Yes, yes, I am. It's called How to Solve Life's Problems. And this particular chapter, chapter 42, he says this: inner freedom, explained by Spinoza, when we are able to come to a clear idea of any passion or emotion, such as anger, fear, envy, greed, ambition, hate, pain, and so on, the passion or the emotion ceases. So we begin to look at our emotions. The fear or the anger or the stress will lessen. We become less. Why? Because the mind is looking, and that's where we want to look. Not to judge, but to look. It's very difficult to look. It's very, very difficult to look. How do you look? How do you see? So the understanding is part of the mind that wants to understand. Just like when you were, say, in school. I'll take myself an example. As a boy, I was struggling with multiplications. And I couldn't get it. My peers, other schoolmates, seemed to be getting figured it out. But I was having a problem. And then suddenly I had an aha experience. What is this aha experience? The mind. The mind says, I know, I see, I get it. And so there is a light in the mind, and that's the understanding. When you read a book and read it the first time, it's superficial. It's a surface reading. It's information, yes, but there's no understanding. You must take one of my teacher's chapters and ponder upon it. Another thing he says, writing what you observe is a highly successful aid in self-observation because this activates the mind. Activating the mind. That's what we want to do. Because in Proposition 1, in Part 3 of the Ethics, Spinoza explains that in certain cases the mind is active and in certain cases the mind is passive. So we have a mind that is comprised of ideas that is confused. And so a good example of confusion is, say, I'll call my friend Eddie, who was on vacation and came home and his place was a mess. He had a friend stay at his place for a couple of weeks. Told him he will maintain it. And when he got there, his friend was gone and it was dirty. The beds were not made. Dishes were in the sink and so on. And And the refrigerator door was left open. So can you imagine? So he was very upset. And so so every day you are going to get upset for things that happen that you wish had not happened or should not happen. So we live in a world of shoulds and should nots, and what is right and what is wrong. What we're wanting to learn is learn how to live in reality. So my friend Eddie comes home and he's doing this work, and he's realized at first he was overwhelmed with pain, hate, and anger because his desire was not met. What was his desire? Come home, relax, have a beer, watch television. But no, he was so disappointed, so much in pain. So he felt pain, hate, and anger. And what is anger? Anger is desire to remove our pain any way possible. We might even walk away or run away or start screaming or yelling, or we might hit the individual if someone confronts you or interferes with your desires or does something you disapprove of. If you're the emotional type, you'll confront that individual. If you are an intellectual type, non-emotional, you won't say anything, but you will do things. You might just walk away or just be quiet and be in fear. So individuals, and this is where Gurdjieff is so important. Gurdjieff talks about that man is asleep. But what is asleep? What is asleep is his intelligence. What is the intelligence then? There's two parts, the passive and the active. The passive intelligence is believing in free will. It acquires a lot of information, but it doesn't understand that information. That's a lower level of intelligence. And the higher level of intelligence is desire to understand. And that's why you must have a journal to do this work. For those interested in doing this work, where you can find me, just down below, you'll see my website, wayofspinoza.com. And there are many videos that you can look at and to see if this is what you want. I'm looking for those who are really interested in wanting to improve their nature, to come to fulfillment, to really be happy, to come to sense of self-approval. Most people are living in fear, in pain, in suffering. And that's what Buddha saw. That is humanity. Yes, you might be rich, you might be a doctor, you might be a businessman, but you live in fear. You're afraid everything you own will disappear, or you're afraid of your health. You're afraid of dying, or you're afraid of being alone. This work will give you an aim and a purpose. I'm going to pause for a moment and I'll get back to you. I'm going to continue on another video. This is the first video, so there'll be two parts to this video. So I'll see you later.